Right now, we're moving into an interesting dispensation that we are having a pandemic that affected manufacturing not only in Kenya but across the world. Perhaps give us a quick snapshot of how your business was affected during the pandemic, and are things leveling off so far?
So certainly, I think the first comment you made is true. BIC, as we all know, has been in Kenya for over 40 years, and predominantly we are known for writing instruments and specifically the BIC crystal pen. And with that, we're obviously have been affected through the pandemic. So there's no getting away from the fact that schools were closed through COVID and for large parts of last year, that we were impacted as a business. And we saw that impact in our manufacturing numbers and the volumes that we would have manufactured on stationery and pens. I think I'd like to just take you back a step, though, if I could, and just to give you an overview of BIC as a company. I mean, I know as Kenyans and around the world, we all identify the pen as the primary product that BIC sells. But BIC as a company has shavers, we have lighters, and we have many other products that we have in the market. Mm-hmm. And if we look at a year like COVID, yes, schools had a big impact when they were closed, and we saw some concerns around the volumes that we were producing. But we saw some increases in the likes of these shavers that we also manufacture locally.
All
so
right.
we were able to concentrate on areas as a business and focus on them and ensure that we were still growing in certain aspects of the business.
Interestingly, how deep an impact was this? Is it possible to quantify this in percentage terms?
Certainly. As mentioned, we as BIC opened the East African subsidiary in the start of 2019, where previously we had HACO that were managing as a distributor, and they had the distribution agreement for BIC as a manufacturing entity and a commercial entity. Mm-hmm. And we opened the business here in East Africa at the beginning of 2019. Getting to your point, we had an absolutely exceptional year in 2019, which set a good groundwork. And the first 3 months of 2020 were strong. We hadn't felt the impact.
Oh, yeah.
And then on the 18th of March 2020, we had the first announcement that schools were closed. And effectively from March right through to, I would say, October, November, we saw a heavy impact in the business, specifically in Kenya, but also in the other regions that we serve. Mm-hmm. We serve the whole of East Africa as a market, so the global impact. And as a business, we saw probably a 30% decline, so 70% of those strong performances of 2019.
All right. But now the schools have resumed. Hopefully, we are going to see more vaccination happening across the country, and this restores confidence in the education system and also, of course, in the hospitality sector. But going straight into my next question, it's more about what does the outlook look like, especially now that we have a couple of measures in place in regards to ensuring safety of learners. And for you as a manufacturer, what opportunities are you seeing? What projections are you looking at?
Yeah, so I agree with you. The sentiment is exactly as you explained. What we have actually seen, and what's quite interesting for us, is that the consumer perception mm-hmm. drives the economy. And the first 3 months of 2021, there was still a lot of uncertainty around what was happening with COVID. Following the first 3 months, so going into April, we started to see traction across East Africa, and we started to see us returning to the volumes that we had seen in 2019. As you mentioned, schools in Kenya open on Monday, on the 26th, and we have seen a massive confidence in the consumer and our customers in terms of buying stock, preparing for the back to schools. Mm-hmm. So June and July, we've seen a good recovery on those numbers.
All right.
In terms of the manufacturing and the numbers that we're seeing, we're at the same level. In fact, a little bit better than we were in 2019 because of the seasonality. We're aware that we see seasonality in our market. When schools go back, the demand is higher. And effectively, Monday sees the start of the 2021 school calendar. So everybody's ready to start again, and we've noticed that there's an uptake at the moment.
All right, I can imagine the workers in the factory, they're all raring to go. But moving to my next point, of course, is what are some of the lessons that you've been able to pick from this pandemic where no one knew it would stay this long? As a manufacturer, how are you repositioning yourself to remain relevant, at the same time to remain competitive in these very unprecedented times?
Well, as I mentioned in the beginning, BIC is a company that isn't just focused on the one line of products being the pens and the stationery. We've been able to diversify, and we've been able to diversify and see stronger growth in our shaver category and in our lighter category. On top of that, you spoke about how we're innovating and how we're going about adding to our portfolio. We have additional products in the shaver lines. We have additional products that are coming into the stationery line that we are launching in the market, and we are seeing some very good sell-out and traction in the retail stores and the traditional trade.
All right. Speaking about the retail stores, they serve a critical element in your value chain in regards to having the right model. Perhaps give us a sense of what is the sentiment like among suppliers who endured quite a blip when you look back and see how the pandemic affected the supply chains?
Yeah, so we as a company, we have an internal supply chain division that carefully manages the volumes that we need to produce and the stock that we hold. So through the pandemic, when we saw volumes reducing and we saw that we would be slowing down slightly on the production, we were able to manage those forecasts. So in terms of suppliers and our suppliers, we were able to maintain that relationship and keep ourselves in line with the forecast that we had.
All right. And as we come to the near tail end of our discussion, I'm curious to find out from you, technology has impacted on education. We're literally seeing the digitization of education. And going back to what you're saying, as you have diversified, I've not heard you touch on how you're looking at technology, because in this day and age, you're moving into the iPads. In schools, we're having a shift, as opposed to the times when I was a young man, where we used to write on foolscaps. I still love writing, but how do you still crack and stay relevant in this very competitive environment?
First and foremost, BIC as a company is one that's always looking at innovation. It's an international company that has a large mergers and acquisitions department where they're constantly on the lookout for new opportunities, new products, new categories of products that we would be able to keep ourselves relevant. So from that aspect, the company has a global strategy. They are looking forward. They are looking ahead. I think in terms of locally in each market, the example of digital learning, I think we've seen quite clearly over the course of COVID with virtual learning and iPad learning that there's a deep connection that children need to have with education, with meeting their friends at school, with writing pen on paper. And I think the reality is that pens are always going to be a part of our lives, so that will always be a focus of BIC's, not taking away from the fact that we're looking for additional opportunities and other business ventures. Globally, if we go back again, I spoke about the mergers and acquisitions. BIC has looked at, they've recently just purchased a company called Rocketbook, which is a company in the digital space of writing and education. So very core to the education that BIC has at the fundamental of the business. We're also looking for different avenues and how we can stay relevant, as you spoke about.
All right. And as we wrap it up, Mr. Sinclair, it would be unfair for me to end this discussion without also getting to understand some of the challenges, especially operating in the Kenyan business environment. The cost of power remains a very thorny issue for many manufacturers, as well as, of course, infrastructure across the country. Perhaps give us a sense of perspective in regards to this. And if you had audience with the president, what would be some of the key issues that you'd like him to address?
Well, in reality, we as BIC, as I said, we opened the subsidiary in the beginning of last year because we saw how important the East African market was to us. And what we realized when we set about building the business plan was we had been operating with our distributor in these markets. We knew of many of the challenges that come with operating in East Africa. So we built our business to be able to function within that environment.
All right.
There are certainly things that come as you're doing business that are challenges, but there's no business that doesn't have a challenge. And I think we were aware what we were coming to, what we were going to operate in. In reality, we are very confident that the President has the Big Four agenda, manufacturing being one of those key pillars, and we maintain to be a strong part of that. And we maintain that we will continue to manufacture a quality product with local skills and maintain a product for Kenya and East Africa.
All right. And in closing, what are your projections for 2021? Of course, we are going into an election season. Is this likely to affect the market, or you have sufficient shock absorbers?
Certainly, the elections have always been a concern in Kenya specifically. Prior to this session or interview, we were conducting an outlook for a marketing presentation for next year and what we're looking at. And we're positive. We're positive what's going to happen next year. We've come out of COVID. We can't be anything but positive. We're starting to see the signs. The economy is gaining traction again.
Sure.
We obviously have reservations. We are making sure that we manage our OPEX, manage our business, manage our infrastructure, our manufacturing side. And with that, we have a positive outlook for 2022.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Sinclair, for speaking to us.
Thank you for your time.
Hoping to interact more in the coming days. We'll be having more and more of this here on the program. We've been taking a deep dive into matters manufacturing, and of course, he's quite optimistic that the 2022 election will not in any way affect the business projections for the big East Africa. Thank you for your time. Let's move on now, and the government has announced that